going to call this meeting of the Cartersville City Council to order. If you will please stand, we'll have our invocation by Councilman McDaniel, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by our Civic Youth Day leaders, and then the National Anthem by the CHS Varsity Singers.
I think what we'll do this morning is just have a silent prayer and pray for something that you want to happen to you today. Nothing bad, everything good. Before we start praying, to look at this crowd out here remind me of many years ago when I taught math. I come in the classroom sometime late, and I had to do just like the mayor, holler. Let us pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lots of voices.
There were.
Yeah, you got to do the national anthem.
Wow, they called it now. Stand up. You weren't kidding.
Yeah, they got to do the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glance, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Play ball. Great job, folks.
Wonderful, wonderful.
A lot better than the fray was at the national championship game.
Yeah, that was great.
Thank you again to the CHS Varsity Singers under the direction of Mr. Jim Stanley. Wonderful indeed. We meet the first and third Thursday of every month. Y'all come back and do that every time as far as I'm concerned. Ms. Fonsel, if you'll please call the roll.
Carrie Hodge, Councilmember Ward 1.
Here.
Jay Stepp, Councilmember Ward 2.
Here.
Lewis Tonsmeyer, Councilmember Ward 3.
Here.
Lindsey McDaniel, Councilmember Ward 4.
Here.
Diane Tate, Councilmember Ward 5.
Here.
Lori Pruitt, Councilmember Ward 6.
Here.
Thank you. First order of business, and we got a lot to do today. But the first order of business on the agenda is the approval of the council meeting minutes from our April 5th meeting. Those minutes have been distributed well in advance of today, so the chair will entertain any additions, edits, or motions.
Mayor, didn't see any additions or corrections. Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And minutes are approved. We are going to swear in our Youth Day officials. I'm going to turn that over to our clerk, Ms. Fons, to do that.
Everybody come up and line up against the wall.
You just want the mayor and the city council?
Mayor and city council folks.
Oh.
Yeah.
Only those of you who are mayor and city council members and school board.
And then we're going to get y'all to sing.
of the office. And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office. So help me God. So help me God.
Go ahead and be seated now. All right, we have a couple of items to add to the agenda. Chair will ask for those 2 items to be added to the agenda.
Ask those to be added to the agenda.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those items are added. I'm going to ask Linda Benton to come up and make a presentation to the school, excuse me, to the council here, and make an introduction for us.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning.
Members of the City Council. It's my honor today to introduce to you the newly appointed future principal of Cartersville High School. He's been a resident of Cartersville for 4 years. He has been involved in Cartersville for, I think, 14 years as a member of Cartersville Country Club. He is currently serving as the principal at Oakwood High School in Cobb County, formerly assistant principal at North Cobb High School, where he was also athletic director. Prior to that, he was assistant principal at Chapel Hill High School in Douglas County. He began his education career as a social studies teacher, and he will assume full responsibility at Cartersville High School July 1st. In the meantime, he is meeting individually with the faculty, staff, and employees at Cartersville High School. So it's my honor to introduce Mr. Steve Butler.
Welcome. Any words?
I just want to tell the board what an opportunity this is for me. It's an amazing chance to be in a truly community-based school. We talk a lot about that in education, but having been in this area for as long as I have, it is amazing to see the ties that Cartersville High School has to the entire county and the Cartersville community. And I look forward to embracing that and to building upon that great relationship. So I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as part of that same item, I want to call the current principal of Cartersville High School to the podium, Mr. Jay Floyd. And I want to publicly thank you. We know you're moving on to other things. But just like this morning, or I guess earlier this week when I said, hey, who do I need to call to round up somebody to sing this morning? Obviously, you did it quickly and in grand style, and I think that's kind of been your signature since you've been here, that anytime somebody's asked, I know personally and a number of other people, when they've asked for something to be done or who do I need to get to, you take the bull by the horns, and you've done exactly what you did this morning. You made it the best that it could possibly be. I know you put your heart and soul into a lot of things in this community, and we're happy for you and your opportunity, but you will be missed, and I just think you were deserving of being honored this morning.
I
So
appreciate
thank
it. I gave Mr. Stanley a bottle of Advil, and I said, let's do it.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Floyd deserves a little bit of gratitude from everybody. All right, the second item is kind of a feel-good item, and you'll need to indulge a little bit. I want to call forward Ms. Anna Grace Walmeck to the front. If she wants to be joined by her parents, that's fine. If she wants to stand up here by herself, that's fine as well. Right there is perfect, young lady. I have a proclamation today that reads, whereas Civic Youth Day is a day to celebrate and recognize the many achievements of local youth, and whereas our community depends on people who are caring and responsibility to maintain our quality of life, and whereas Anna Grace Walmeck, who is the daughter of Joey and Paula Walmeck, is an outstanding 4th grade student at Cartersville Elementary School, and whereas Anna Grace has many interests, including dancing, singing, acting, playing basketball and soccer, as well as a love for animals, and whereas she has demonstrated her love for animals and community, one January morning when she rescued 2 dogs and cared for them until the owner arrived, and whereas those 2 dogs belong to the family of the mayor, and he and his family are eternally grateful for Anna Grace's heroic actions. Now, therefore, I, Matthew J. Santini, Mayor of the City of Cartersville, do proclaim today, April 19th, 2012, as Anna Grace Walmeck Day in Cartersville, and I encourage all citizens to celebrate and be inspired by the community spirit and civic pride of this wonderful young lady on Civic Youth Day. That should be back in school. All right, we'll now take just a moment for those people that need to tend to other things or take part in Civic Youth Day outside of this council chambers to go ahead and do what you're going to do. Thank you to Ms. Benton, who I did not properly recognize as the Cartersville City School Board Chair. That's what happens when you're good friends with somebody, you forget all about titles. So, thank you.
Mayor, while they are exiting, I'd like to mention something.
Talk loud.
I was absolutely blown away by the national anthem.
City council, city department heads, civic youths, y'all stay. School board youths, y'all leave.
Oh, that was really good.
Well, man,
Thanks for doing
I was going to do it anyway. I didn't put it in the agenda
She's probably not tall.
Oh, really?
yeah,
The 8-inch heel.
yeah, they need to shoot up.
Plus the fact that she's got that much in her front.
Yeah. Like walking on stilts. Huh? I wonder if there's enough here for the council members in the park.
I don't know.
That's my understanding. Oh, really?
Well, Kentucky got around this starting fight.
Doesn't matter.
I know.
Take another 5
Yeah.
Load them up.
They'll definitely be top 5 next year.
They'll have a little more competition in Bloomington next year.
A little bit.
All right, let's go ahead and get started with the order of the day. I just like smacking that gavel. I didn't really need to do that there. We have a couple of first readings and public hearings. I'll call Mr. Menino to the front, please.
Hey, Tim, you want to get that door, please? Or can you?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you had noted, this is a first reading of an
Okay,
annexation
all right.
and zoning
Sorry.
request. The first case, AZ 12-03, is part of the City Annexation Initiative. The property is located at 102 Dogwood Drive. It's at the corner of Dogwood Drive and Jones Mill Road. Again, as I noted, it is a zoning annexation. It's completely surrounded by city property. It went through the public hearing with the Planning Commission. The individual city departments as well as the county did review the application. There are no objections to this request, and the Planning Commission did recommend this for approval.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Menino at this point? Thank you, Randy. I'll open up a public hearing for the zoning portion of this request. Actually, I'll open it up for the annexation portion of this request. Anybody wishing to step forward, speak for or against may do so at this time. And seeing none, I'll close the public hearing for the annexation portion. I will now open up a public hearing for the zoning portion of this request. Once again, anybody wishing to step forward and speak either for or against may do so at this time. And seeing none, I will close the public hearing for zoning on file number AZ 12-03. This is the first reading. No vote is going to be taken today. We'll take this up for final consideration at our first meeting in May. Next item is file number SU 12-01, special use.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. This is a site along Tennessee Street. It's actually Tennessee and McKever. It is the site of Kia Automobile. With that particular site, the property is zoned MU. The Kia dealership is already existing in our current ordinance in the MU zoning district. Automotive sales is a non-conforming use, however, the automotive dealership has already been there and in existence. Our ordinance does allow for a special use if you choose to try to expand that particular business. As I had mentioned in the previous meeting, this particular type of request used to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and it was a one-hearing process. Since we've reorganized and reworked the zoning ordinance, it's now done as part of the public hearing process, the same process we do for a zoning. With that, the application was reviewed based on the standards for special use. The individual departments that review these applications have all reviewed, and there were no objections to the application. Public hearing with the Planning Commission, there are no issues and no concerns with the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission does recommend this for your approval.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Menino on this item? Thank you, sir. And I will open up a public hearing for special use application 12-01. Anybody wishing to step forward and speak either for or against may do so at this time.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning.
Jeff Watkins here on behalf of the applicant, council members. As Mr. Menino indicated, my client is located on Tennessee Street for the Kia dealership. He wishes to stay. Tennessee Street's been very good to him as well as the city, and in order to do that, he needs more room for his inventory, and that's the purpose of putting this property under contract. It's currently owned by Hamilton State Bank. In order to purchase the property, he has to get the permit.
Okay.
Ask that you approve. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Watkins?
Are they going to be knocking down that building, or what's their plans with that whole?
There's not any plans to demolition either building. You may change the facade a little bit and make it more conducive for use by the dealership, but right now there's no plans to do that.
They just, they said that it was for an extension of the lot. For more cars.
There's parking there that we have it under lease right now.
Okay.
With the dealership.
Let me see if I understand this. In other words, part of that lot that where the cars are parked is under lease, and you want to change the ordinance?
They want to expand it.
I don't see how much expand you can.
Mr. McDaniel, it starts here, runs this way.
That's on the corner of there by the
McEver and Tennessee. There's a building here and a good bit of parking right there, and then here's another building. And it's this whole strip. It's actually two parcels. There'll be a good bit of parking to the left there, as well as in front here.
And is that portion you're shining light on there, is that currently under lease as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But it's not currently being used for the car lot?
No.
And that's the purpose why they have to come before you for the special use permit?
Used to, we would
use
get
it
the
for
special.
car lot.
I'm sorry, Keith. Used to, we would get the special use permit before the Board of Zoning Appeals, but the ordinance was changed, and now we have to come before the council.
Jeff, I recognize the audio building, but the next one, what did that used to be? It's behind it.
It's behind.
I can visualize now, thank you.
There's an old barber shop behind that building right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. You remember that, don't you, Jason?
What?
Shop.
Body shop, where you used to have to take cars?
There used to be a restaurant in there too.
Any other questions for Mr. Watkins? I know how shy you are in having a full room to speak in front of.
It's like the old days when people really cared about zoning.
You can be seated now.
That could be front.
Once again, this is a public hearing relative to special use permit SU 12-01. Anybody wishing to step forward, speak for or against may do so at this time. And seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And once again, this is the first reading. Council will take this up for final consideration at our first meeting in May. Thank you, Mr. Watkins. We also have the first reading of another ordinance. And Richard, you're going to handle this one, please, regarding the City of Cartersville sign ordinance.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the mid-90s, we had a number of ordinances adopted: development regulations, zoning ordinance, landscaping ordinance, sign ordinance. Since that time, all except sign ordinance have been significantly revised based on legal issues and newer technology. And so it's the sign ordinance's turn in the hopper, you might say. And so really, we based a good existing sign ordinance, did not take that away, but just revised it to take into account that there are electronic signs in more proliferation than previously. And kind of a glaring example is at Main Street and 41, the Title Max sign. As proposed, any future sign, no matter where it would be located, could not flash, bing, move left or right, anything like that. The question is whether or not, depending on location, it would be like the billboard at 41 and Center Road, where it shines and then 10 seconds later it flips to a different message, or it shines and then a minute or more it changes. On the main thoroughfares, 41, 411, and 20, the 10-second rule would apply. Everywhere else it's a major street, like Church Street, certain sections of Dothat Ferry, Old Mill Road, in certain sections, things like that, the 1-minute rule would apply. And what we've got in your existing packet is Planning Commission's recommendation. The only modification since then is that we have had a request specific to Dothat Ferry Road. Right now, the 1-minute rule on electronic signs would be allowed for electronic signs to exist on Dothat Ferry from West Avenue south until Pine Grove Road, there at Grove Park. We've received a request since the Planning Commission passed it on to you that electronic signs be allowed in between Pine Grove Road and Indian Mounds Road. And that was a specific request from a church. Again, really a static or stationary electronic sign that would sit there 1 minute or longer and then change. For twirler, curb cut signs, held or worn, we don't have a whole lot of details right now in our ordinance, and so we added some language based on research. Freestanding signs, the size would not change a whole lot. They would not get bigger in most cases, and in some cases, especially like in residential areas, they would be substantially smaller than currently allowed. For temporary event signs, right now, if your business in the city of Cartersville is brand new, you can get a grand opening permit and for 30 days have a variety of signs, banners, things like that. We had received feedback from existing businesses stating that it may give brand new businesses an unfair advantage, so that if a great business has been here for 5 or 10 years, it could not have a temporary event. And so we propose as city staff to level the playing field, and instead of 30 days, one time a year, allow businesses for 14 days with a permit to have temporary event signs. Billboards would not change very much from our current ordinance. They would not change in size, and they would not change very much in location. If anything, it would be restricted in the sense that right now, somebody could put up a sign on a billboard on Old Mill Road or Burnt Hickory Road, but those are not designated state routes right now. So as proposed, billboards would only be allowed on state routes and U.S. highways. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Mayor, I do. Do you mind, Richard, clarifying the temporary event signs? In other words, new that are having grand opening, new businesses, grand openings, currently 30 days. we're leveling the playing field, let me make sure I have it right, 14 days for any business. Is that correct?
One time a year.
One time a year?
Yes,
With a
ma'am.
separation of, let's say a business chooses 4 days, then to have a temporary sign out. Did I read somewhere in here separation?
Well, that's if they did it at the very end of the year, they have to have separation, like if they're gonna do it at the end of December and into January, they can't have it run over in 30 days.
And this is a one-time a-year permit. So if somebody said, well, I want to do 4 days, 4 days, 4 days, 2 days, that would not be possible. It's going to be one permit, and you can do it for up to 14 days. And that's it, once a year.
And that's the same for a new business as well. They only get
Correct.
14 days as well.
Yes, sir.
Not okay.
And we had plenty of input from our business people, that this did level the playing field and they liked this. Is that correct, Richard?
We did. That was specifically a request from private businesses.
And again, you said billboards would be allowed on state highways and what?
State routes, US highways, so of course, because US 41 does have a state designation as well, I think it's State Route 3. So 41 and 411 would be allowed billboards, and then 20 and the other state routes, 61, 113 in certain areas.
So everywhere but 75.
Everywhere but 75, and the East Main Street Gateway Corridor area would not be allowed.
That's where the overlay district is for the Main Street Gateway. Is that
Correct.
And the West Avenue part of 61, 113 would not be allowed either, correct? The residential area there.
East of Henderson.
West Avenue from Henderson Drive west would be allowed billboards, but in town, West Avenue, where the nice houses are, would not be allowed to have a billboard.
And clarify Old Mill Road, because I know there's like 2.
It's not a state route.
But there's 2 billboards there currently, but no additional. Not even out past Henderson Drive. Okay. All right.
So at what point on these state highways that you're mentioning is the city going to determine that we have enough?
It's based on distance, and it's specifically based on the foresight about future electronic billboards. We've only got one in the city limits right now. However, if in the future somebody wanted to have one electronic billboard and then another electronic billboard, they would have to be basically a mile apart, 5,000 feet. So they'd have to be almost a mile apart in distance on the same road.
The current standards for separation of billboards are staying in place. Regular.
So again, just so that
We
we're
have a
all on the
1,500
same
foot
page,
separation required.
we're, all these areas, we're agreeing if this is passed to allow them.
No new areas are actually allowed based on the previous ordinance. It does give a little more restriction on a few of the existing roads. The separation requirement is still the same distance apart. So it's actually a little bit more restrictive than before, just based on the fact that we designated state routes as roadways for the allowance.
And with all the setbacks from existing buildings, existing residential, things like that, you're talking about basically clutter of a lot of billboards on the same street. It would be very difficult to get a new billboard as proposed on Tennessee Street, because even though it's a state route, I mean, it's so built up now with buildings and residential, and it has been for a long time, that with the setbacks and everything, it would be difficult, and distance from other billboards.
Thank you.
And Ms. Tate, to answer a question you had asked at one of the earlier work sessions, the ordinance does still allow a property, for example, to have a freestanding sign on it, and then they can also have a billboard as well.
Keith, grandfathered in, we talked about a number of places. Jace, did you mention 2 on O'Mill and the grandfathered in?
Yes.
Still allows it, okay.
Yeah. They will still be allowed, traditionally for non-conforming signs, if they get too dilapidated and a sign owner comes and tells the city they want to put up a new modern sign there instead of the old dilapidated one. The Board of Zoning Appeals in the past has allowed that because we figure a nice new sign is better than an old dilapidated one for a public viewing. But otherwise, they will eventually, use on that property will expire when the sign falls down.
Let me ask you this, Keith. John Lewis took down a billboard right next to the meat market on Main Street. And that billboard came down, let's say 2 years ago. When that comes down, then
He loses
This is
his
the grandfather.
permit. Unlike, say for zoning, for instance, we don't really have a grace period that if you stop using a billboard or the structure, that you can then go back and rebuild one there. You know, like for a zoning use of a property, you know, if you're a gas station and you stop being a gas station for 6 months and you come back for a rezoning, you're still allowed to be a gas station for the new owner. Once you take that billboard down, you have to reapply for a new permit.
just wondered about that.
Any other discussion or questions?
Just one question. What's the proposed effective date if this were to pass next meeting?
Once it passes, anything new falls under this newly revised ordinance. Anything existing, we're not going to go out and, run them down and say,
when the mayor
well,
adjourns
whatever
the
sign, you can't do that anymore. Correct.
Upon approval?
Yeah, upon approval.
Okay,
Unless y'all put a specific date in there you want it to be effective for.
okay.
And just one last thing, I guess I've missed most of these meetings, these work session meetings and stakeholder meetings, but I've always expressed my displeasure with the electronic signs. Has that been a huge push from the stakeholders that we need electronic signs throughout the city? 10 seconds or 1 minute? I mean, is that something we gotta have?
Well,
I mean, obviously we don't have
I
to,
would-
but.
No, we don't have to.
Let me intervene because once again, it's kind of a policy thing.
We may have somebody here speak in favor of electronic signs in the audience. We found it to be an issue because once one went up on 41 near Kroger, we got a lot of complaints about the motion and brightness and the movement of it. So the first thing that we did is went and looked at some other regulations. Richard did some research, and there's a way to limit that motion where that it only changes once.
Yeah, but in the new ordinance, we're allowing them on other roads as well.
On 41, 411, they're already allowed in
Yeah.
those corridors. Now it's going to allow for them in other places where they already exist on a few lots, but without the motion. As opposed to somebody having to put up a reader board where they manually go up there, McDonald's changes their, Big Mac special for the week with a manual change, and they'll be able to change their message electronically with a laptop right there in their office.
In following with that, if I may, how do you determine the times for the signs to change? Is that arbitrary, or is that based on some other city or industry standard?
It's not industry standard, but we've done some research on electronic signs, and really, it seems like the future for comparable cities is not outlawing them, but tightly restricting them in the same sense that we are. If you think about just along 41, the Title Max sign, and then you go a mile north, just before you get to Center Road, if you're driving north on the right, the gas station that has an electronic sign,
Right.
I mean, it stays fixed almost all the time, but they change it, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. And so, there's a big difference in the feel of what we've got from stakeholders and others as far as what may be appropriate.
We started with the Georgia DOT standard, which they placed on billboards, which is once every, I think, 10 seconds.
Okay.
They don't allow the motion. They allow them to change their message, but they don't allow motion, and that was the starting point. it.
And the feeling or the need for that is because if it changes too fast, it's distracting?
Yes.
Yeah, there are some studies in there. Richard reviewed several of them, and they are part of the proposed ordinance, and he has copies of them if you want to read them,
Wow.
which sort of go into some more detail about the impact upon motoring traffic of the various types of
I've
electronic
heard
signs.
discussion that some people confuse the one at 41 and, what is it, West or one
East
third-
Main Street or
Yeah, they
whatever.
confuse that with emergency
Yes,
lighting.
blue, because it's
Yeah,
the blue.
I never really thought about that.
We've heard that concern also.
Yeah.
But the industry's kind of, I mean, a lot of the industry is going towards electronic signs, and I think in this case, done a pretty good job of at least embracing where the industry is going and restricting it to the point to where it doesn't become an eyesore, and you've got all these flashing and distracting things on the side of the road. It's kind of like just what's coming next, whether or not you like them or not.
Okay.
Kind of like the Facebook timeline.
Can we vote against that too?
I vote against it.
Any other questions for Richard?
Okay, just let me
Sure.
understand one thing. If there is a flashing sign that moves or changes more frequently than 6 times a minute or is not static, when this ordinance takes effect, they will have to comply, or they can still do their flashing moving thing?
Those few that have already been permitted under the old ordinance still remain, I guess, remain grandfathered. Now, we could make an effort to go out and talk to these folks. Because again, that's where we get most of our complaints from.
And if any of them have to be re-permitted for some reason, at that point, they will have to come in compliance with the new standards.
There's never any discussion of any kind of amortization to allow them time to comply. That's not done, I guess.
We did not do that. I guess we could go back with.
I'm not suggesting it, I just wondered if it was discussed.
Yeah, we really did not discuss it. I mean, really, if you wanted to do that, the normal method would be you would go to a system of permitting signs on an annual basis, and that way the signs, each sign would be permitted annually. They would pay some sort of fee to the city, and then if the ordinances changes during that year, then they would have to update their sign to comply with the new ordinance for the next year.
I guess I'm not really suggesting they lose their sign. I'm just suggesting, is it possible that they have to slow down their messages?
We can always ask and request, and then, if we do make you would assume the Title Max sign does meet DOT standards because they are on a DOT road. So you would assume DOT.
They did not have to comply with the DOT billboard standards.
Okay.
Because they're not a billboard.
It's not a billboard, okay.
And it's not static.
Yeah.
They did not
So-
require a DOT permit.
But I mean, it's something we can go out and talk with them and address.
Okay.
Okey dokey.
Because they were granted a variance for that particular sign use.
Isn't there a furniture company that does one that
Nelson's
rolls
did,
and-
yeah.
On the left there.
Yeah, they use less apparently offensive colors, I guess.
Okay, any other discussion? More questions?
If the minor tweak for electronic, stationary, freestanding signs, Dothett Ferry Road, just extending that for the church's request from Grove Park and Pine Grove there down to Indian Mounds Road is generally acceptable to mayor and council, I will revise the ordinance format, and in your 2 weeks from now packet, have the revised ordinance format that could be voted upon next meeting.
But as presented, it doesn't include that.
Why don't you do this? Why don't you just,
Just have
if
both.
council's agreeable to this, just leave it as is
Yeah.
and make a note of it at our next public, when you present it to us before, and then if there's other discussion to be had, we could either add it, we could amend the existing
Proof as
one.
amended, yeah.
We can approve it as amended.
Yeah.
That sound good? Is that agreeable to everybody?
Yes, Mayor, but
Okay.
Richard, is that one church's request or two? There's two actually on
Probably
that.
two.
Is that-
Heritage
For
Baptist
Heritage.
has been following the sign ordinance for the last year and a half since we've been working on it. It was one that physically had a
When-
request.
It's also the location of the new Baptist church out there too.
So it'd actually be 3 churches, wouldn't it?
Mhm. Any other discussion? Thank you, Richard. I will open up a public hearing relative to this first reading of the ordinance. Anybody wishing to step forward, speak for or against, or otherwise make comment may do so at this time. And seeing none step forward, I will close the public hearing. Once again, this is the first reading of an ordinance. We read those twice before making a vote, so there will be no vote today. We will press on. We have come to the lightning round. Cartersville Building Authority.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is appointments to that authority. This board is used to finance city improvements. Some of them that we've done in the past are the old courthouse under the bridge and utilities to Toyo. It's a financing mechanism when we can't do it in traditional means. I sit on that board, also Jack Clayton and Tom Quist. The recommendation here is to reappoint the 3 through May 15th of 2016.
Okay. Any comments, discussion, or the chair will entertain a motion?
Motion to approve the 3 names submitted.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Anderson.
Glutton for punishment.
Yes, sir, Mayor and Council. This agreement is with Southland Engineering. This is, the City Council approved the accepting the grant from the T grant from DOT in an amount of $860,000 this past fall. Per DOT guidelines, we sent out requests for qualifications, and out of those 21 applicants, Southland Engineering was deemed the most qualified. And then we went through a negotiation process, and the amount of $115,219 is the engineering fee. And I think I recommend approval on that. That would be contingent on budget money of the 2012-13 budget.
Any questions for Greg on this item? And if not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Question.
Yes, sir.
The first phase of this trail ended at Mission Road? Yes, sir. The second, it was the second phase, and it ended. It went from Castle Road, the 293 bridge there, right where near the public safety center is being built, and goes along Pettit Creek and ends at Mission Road. This next phase would take it across Mission Road, and the next there would be 2 options for the destination. That would be at the intersection of Burnt Hickory and West Avenue at the McDonald's intersection, or the other option would be taking it down under Burnt Hickory Bridge and coming out at the next traffic light of Walnut Grove and 11361.
My question is from Mission Road to your next phase, going across Mission Road. How are you going to get to your next phase there? What are your plans for that, engineering type? In other words, it ends right there at Mission Road, and you're going to begin on the other side of Mission Road and continue.
Yes, sir.
What's in that gap right there?
Well, we will be crossing Mission Road.
Walk across Mission Road?
Yes, sir. Well, it'll be designed how, but right now it's an at-grade crossing.
Okay. Okay.
Mayor, I have a question. Greg, this didn't occur to me during our work session. Will there be an attempt to make the design have some consistency with the current trail? In other words, the bridges are really beautiful back in there, and will that be a part of the design process?
Yes, it will be. This grant is a T grant, and I guess the standards are much more stringent per DOT standards as the previous the trail grant, which was funded by DNR. But yes, we do want consistency in the trail.
And does this connect us with the other side, or is there still another piece there?
Well, that's
the other part we're working on, right?
There is a Leak Mounds trail that we have a grant for it also.
Okay.
Final question from me. In the back here, it has design, assumptions, and reimbursables. It says assuming no creek crossing, bridge, or boardwalk. And then at the bottom it says if a bridge or creek crossing with a boardwalk is determined, there's like an additional $24,000.
That's the railroad permitting. The most, I guess, the cheapest way to perform this is an at-grade crossing, and again, that determines whether the railroad permits it or not. If they do not permit that, then we'll have to cross another way, and then we will incur the additional design cost.
Do you think that's probably going to happen?
I'd be afraid to say. I mean, you know, that's our hope. You know, we've got several people that are, I guess, talking, you know, for that. But you know, that it's again, it's CSX's decision.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Go ahead.
I sure would like for the young people in the audience to know that this trail system that we're talking about, Pine Mountain, so many things we've done through Parks and Recreation, of course. That's about health and activity, and you sure have plenty of it in high school and middle school, but when you get out of school, we want you to have a lot of good places too. Sam Smith Park, Dillinger. I mean, it's a real mission of this council and something we talked about in visioning sessions. So it's important, we feel like, to the whole quality of life issue in the city.
Thank you. All right, Chair will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Contingent on funds available, is that included in your motion?
Yes, it is now.
Thank you.
Contingent on funds being available.
Thank you.
That second still stand?
It does.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Sam, really, shoot.
Good morning, Mr. Porta.
Good morning. Next item, Mayor, about Downtown Development Authority funding. Been forth a request by the DDA board to basically offer, let us relinquish the $25,000 of our $42,500 second half funding that we've allocated in 2011-2012 budget for operational expenses for the board, as well as to have the city finance department take over the business improvement district funding, the accounting billing for that. They will actually administer the project, so they can. There's a 15% administration fee that they can earn by doing that, and they will process the paperwork, making sure the downtown businesses have filled out the grant paperwork and everything, and then we will actually release the check based on proper accounting for that. The other thing they were asking for is additional funding to basically pay payroll funds forgiveness for past debt that they have, and then I guess those are the items on the table for the council to consider today.
And isn't the third piece the release of the operating funds for the next 3 months?
Yes, at the $25,000 of the $42,500, they wanted to have those funds to continue operation.
Okay.
I have a question. If we, under the circumstances with all the discussion that's been going on with this, if we determine that tabling this item was a good idea, is it gonna put the DDA in a bind for 2 weeks?
I don't know that I can answer that other than they're looking for.
Not necessarily, they just.
Other than they're looking for operating funds.
About 6 weeks into a 6-month process, we're under the DCA requirements that they have to have a director in place, but they'll just shorten the time frame if we go ahead forward on funding them, that they can start looking for a replacement position, replacement individual. Under the Department of Community Affairs, we signed off as a Main Street city, and says they can only be without that director for 6 months.
They can be without a director for 6 months.
Correct. So we're 6 weeks into that. 2 more weeks is, you know,
I mean, we're talking about a good chunk of money, and if we're gonna make some changes, I think we should have those in place prior to determining how this funding is gonna be dealt with.
Well, I would, and I'm not going to disagree with you on that, you know, the choice in making the decision whether or not to forgive the outstanding balance of the taking over the bid process, certainly I think is a very easy hurdle. I think that's a move in the right direction. But I also think that if, in speaking of reorganizing and maybe changing or having a little bit different say in how the organization moves forward, that we are agreeing to funding for the next 3 months. which kind of gives them a window to operate in what is usually a kind of a busy time for downtown. And, but it also is a short enough window that we have time if there's an opportunity for input or discussion with that board to see how we'd like to see that move forward. We still hold the funding authority for the next fiscal year as a carrot or a stick, either way you want to look at it.
Mayor, and just on that note, we already have an existing contract to fund them. There's money currently available. The city can go ahead and continue to fund their existing needs until y'all decide you want to consider all the other issues. Y'all don't have to take any formal action for us to continue funding their organization today, if you don't want to.
Well, if they want the
So we
25K.
can't table it and they still get their funding.
I mean, we have the right, we have a contract with them to go ahead and fund them, and staff can go ahead and forward money for their continued operation for whatever level they want to until such time as y'all revise the contracts and agreements with them.
As long as they don't ask for the 42.5 that we're
A little
holding.
slow.
Yeah.
And I understand what you're saying now. It just kind of clicked in my brain is that the forgiveness of that debt is not something that necessarily needs to happen, a decision that needs to happen today. So if you want to take that part out of the motion or whatever council wants to do, I'm fine with either doing all of it or none of it, or somewhere in the middle.
Well, Mayor, I'll make a motion to table it, and when council feels more comfortable, bring it back up again, which may be 2 weeks or maybe.
Well, it'll show, if we table it, it'll be on the next agenda.
Okay. I make a motion to table it.
Okay. All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And it passes unanimously.
You still
Next item, Mr. Porter.
Yes, Mayor. This is the Clarence Brown Conference Center. There's a management agreement that we put in place a year and a half or so ago before the facility opened up between the county and the city. And there's some housekeeping changes that need to be clarified within the management agreement and the rules and regulations when they rent the facility. If those have been laid out in the council agenda, I recommend approval of those changes.
Any discussion? If there are none, then the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Continue on, Dan.
Next item is change order number 3 for the public safety headquarters, the new building going up on Cassville Road. The major piece of this is Harris Street and Cassville Road. When we started, the contractor started doing undercutting of Cassville Road for the XL and decel lanes. They encountered some soft soil or soil that didn't meet Georgia DOT requirements, so they had to put some additional rock and replace that soil, as well as on Harris Street, where we're replacing that road to lead into the cemetery, as well as also to support our fire engines coming in off of Harris Street into the facility. That piece of the equation is about $185,000. I recommend a change order for that. Other items on the agenda for change order is bullet-resistant glass. As we've gone through different meetings with the contractor and architect, we've talked about some additional bullet-resistant glass for the front lobby area for staff in case we have somebody come in there that has a gun. That's $54,599.20 and change. There's a new kitchen exhaust and system for the fire station side of that didn't meet code. It's $16,000 and change there. There are some other minor changes that were required as we're going through the process. All total with the Harris Street and Castle Road changes is $298,083.97. Recommend approval of these change orders.
Mayor, I have a question.
Go
on
ahead.
Harris Road. Dan, it's been a while since I've been on that Harris Road. It's a short road. Was it ever up to city code? Was it just a kind of road bed with some asphalt?
I'm not sure when it was actually put in existence. It's been many years ago, but that was one thing that the actual contractor, when they started putting the storm drain in for the project, they informed us that, you know, our fire trucks are very heavy, that it may not be able to support that long term. It probably could have lasted for a couple of years, but after the long wear and tear over a couple of years, so we, as the contractor was in place, went ahead and got the council approval. But this will give us many years for that road to support our fire engine, so we wouldn't have to replace that road down.
Well, that's in my ward, and I've walked that road, and I really don't think it was ever like, would make code. now in the city.
Well, of course,
I think it's
some of these
just-
roads like Cartersville Road, when they were built years and years ago, GDOT standards have changed, so the requirements have changed, and we're having more things put in place. Even part of this that I didn't spell out, there's a guardrail on Cartersville Road that GDOT's requiring us, which, it's never been there in the past, but for safety purposes, like I said, the kind of the rules and regulations have changed over time.
Now, is that because of the trail?
No, it's not. There's a drainage ditch on one side of the road, and then because we're widening for deceleration lanes on one side of the road, they're requiring some guardrail on the westbound side.
I've got kind of a petty question, but it kind of caught my attention. You're saying that relative to the kitchen hood in the fire station side of it, it had to be, there's a change order because it wasn't up to code. So you're saying that our design was not up to our own codes?
Correct. The architect engineer design specifications, what they specified was not up to code, so we're having to change that out.
So if we gave them the task of designing the building and they failed to design it to the codes that are in place, shouldn't they be responsible for the redesign of that instead of us?
We can go back after them under their errors and omissions.
Is it not standard in a contract that if you're going to design a building, that you design a building that's up to the local code?
Correct. That is correct, and we'll have the same amount for the fire station was not up to code for the same piece of equipment. But yes, that's something that Sam and I brought up, Sam's attention. We'll have to talk to them. And I'm going through the process now as we continue on with the building. If there's anything else that's kind of missed in the process, that's going to be talked to.
Okay.
Because they're still under contract. They're still meeting, the architect's still meeting every 2 weeks. We're meeting on site, going through different things that have changed that have been going on.
And who caught the fact that it wasn't up to code? The builder?
Fire department, fire marshal, actually.
Because we're going to have a real problem if we design something and then construct something that's not up to our own code.
Well,
The
and-
change order is going to be a lot more than that.
We've got Brandy's department's meeting with Lamar Greason and stuff, because we're talking about electrical panel and stuff within the facility right now. There's some just different issues because of, we want to make sure the building, like I said, it's a long term. It's going to be there for 40, 50 years, so we want to make sure it meets growing needs as well. And that's, we're looking at David Dye, building inspector, and Lamar are talking about that with the architect engineer as well.
Okay. Has this been kind of is this the first of its kind that's come up, or have there been other issues where things weren't
There's
designed
been
to our
some
code?
little issues going back and forth, but quite honestly, the contractor in place is pretty thorough, and they're going through the process with everything and making sure that we're, our building's going to be very well built, and they're making sure that their paperwork's in place and all. So we're kind of,
okay.
There's been little things.
Sort of piggybacking off of Matt, I was going to ask the question. I know that Diane brought it up, in regards to change orders, what's the industry, norm. Matt made a great point, but my question is this $55,000 for bullet resistant glass and wall changes. Obviously, you bring it in front of us and you say, hey, well, we need it to be bulletproof. It's hard for us to say no. If somebody gets shot, they just get shot. So it's a bad situation. But why was that? At what point did that come up? Everybody's walking through the lobby and go, hey, this should be bulletproof. Why wasn't that done prior?
It wasn't brought up during our initial meetings. We had meetings with architect engineer during the planning process with the police and fire chief, and we have bullet resistant glass in the Sallyport area where the prisoners are brought in, and some areas in the back part of the building. It was just, and we have some front stuff for in the front to secure the area, the front of the building, but it was discussed that since we don't have similar at the county commissioner's office where you have the alarm there, go off to walk through there, we don't have that in this building. So somebody could come in there with a gun and take out the admin people.
So basically you get shot if you're not, if you're just sitting in the lobby, you can get shot, but if you're behind the glass, you're good.
In certain areas, yes, but then we have it also because of the police department. We want to make sure, because of the situation, but it wasn't really brought up during the initial process, and we were just looking at down the road. Also, this is an emergency operations center where, in case something does critical happen, we want to make sure it's as secure as possible.
Well, I understand the need for it. I was just wondering why the need just out of nowhere came up as opposed to originally.
Like I said, initially in the plans, we didn't discuss that. We only discussed certain parts of the building, and going the process, things are coming up saying, have you thought about this? And we're going through that process, and hopefully these, because the building's going up, I mean, we're about ready to put the roof on over the next several weeks, so we're kind of, hopefully, the public safety headquarters is kind of trailing off with these should be the bigger pieces. Obviously, the biggest piece is Harris Road and Cassville Road, which is costing us additional money.
I guess I would use an analogy to what we just had with the conference center, where, you know, the conference center had something in place before they started operating and then had to get changed after they operated because it didn't work. I would say that change order that you're referring to might be more, you know, when you're doing a project on that scale, that once it started getting built, it was, you know, I think anytime you build a building of that sort, not that I'm a big fan of change orders, but I think there's a, you know, once you start building it, you go, you know what, we didn't think about that before. But there's a lot that goes into it.
I know we've talked about it. I don't know if you've got a number. There is a contingency that the CM at risk.
Contractor has about 200,000 or so in their contingency in case things come up, and there's been little things that have come up there.
Have we used any of that?
Not right now. They've used a little bit, I think, but not much of it, no.
That could foreseeably be applied to the.
Correct, and there is about $40,000 to $50,000 in savings that we haven't finalized with. What was included in the guaranteed maximum price was some shelving and some gear lockers for the police and fire, and the contractor has gone back to that vendor and a couple other vendors, and that price will come down, probably in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. We just haven't finalized that number, so that will be a savings to offset some of these.
Okay. All right, we have a item to consider on the change order. Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And anybody opposed? Everybody pass? Okay. Motion carries. One more time, Dan.
One more time. This is for the fire station. This actually, the subcontractor in place was Kirkpatrick and Sons, and they were doing the work for us at the fire station. Initially, we thought we had a 6-inch line to serve that building. Once we dug into the ground and stuff, we found out we did not. We got them to do the work to tap into our 8-inch line. The contractor Potts allowed us to work with the Kirkpatrick and Sons separately, so we didn't have to pay the additional management fee on top of that. The actual cost of the work came in a few $1,000s less than what anticipated, but this is the actual invoice was $13,458.80, and this is for the fire station number 4 project.
Okay. Any discussion? And if not, Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Dan. Mr. Riggs, got a couple for us today.
Arose by any of
Yes,
it.
Mayor. It's time for us to fill our odorant tanks up at our 2 stations in Rome, and the cost of doing that is $14,605.
You all out in the audience know what he's talking about. He's buying the gas smell that you smell whenever the gas is leaking.
What is that smell anyway?
Huh?
What is that smell anyway?
It's a mercaptan. It's a sulfur, got sulfur.
That answers my question, all right.
It can be for safety.
Yes, we're required to do that.
Can you have could you change that to like a floral smell maybe?
You would
I
like
think
it,
we had this discussion.
you'd like it to be
There's one that
distinct.
in Las Vegas, there's a casino that got an exemption, and theirs smells like a drink or something. I don't remember what it is.
We'd have to apply to the feds to do that.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, and thank you again. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Continue on, sir.
Okay, we have to relocate a line for the county to tie into a storm drain, and the cost of the 2 control fittings and the tapping and stopping operation is $12,924. So,
And on this one, just to let you know, it's usually not our policy to pay to relocate lines that are in the way of county projects, but this one's located in the city. It is a SPLOST project, and if you're familiar with your Harley Road as it comes into 113, a lot of times it will back up for people in the morning coming in there. This improvement that they're doing will give 2 lefts through that signal. So
And this will be funded with, it's 2003 SPLOST funds, is it not? Is it 07? Okay.
they ask us to do that, and we agreed if you approve.
Yep. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Actually, wait a second, we need a motion and a second.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Got a motion over here, a second over there. Now if you want to vote, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Gary. Mr. Molinax, you've got the next three, I do believe. Actually, the next four.
Mayor, council. Water Department has need on an almost daily basis for a GPS survey instrument. We use this for mapping of the water and sewer lines, as well as going out and finding valves and manhole covers that have been covered over. We received bids from 4 different vendors. Optical Engineering submitted a bid of $13,199.99. Earl Dudley Incorporated submitted a bid of $13,246.75. T-Rick Survey Supplies, Inc. submitted a quote of $13,568.75. Laser Products, LLC submitted a quote of $13,500. The Water Department recommends approval of the purchase of this equipment for an amount of $13,199 from Optical Engineering of Marietta, Georgia. This equipment will be paid for from the budget item this is an unbudgeted item and will be paid for from the Instruments and Implements Capital Improvement Account.
Okay, any questions for Ed on this item?
Just kind of pursuant to what we were talking about earlier, who has these? Do you have one, and we've got one in mapping?
We have.
Electric doesn't have one, and gas doesn't have one.
They're a heavy user of it. Makes sense for them to have that one.
Okay.
The other one's going to work with the GIS department to measure.
And if the other folks have need of it, of course you'll share it.
That's correct.
Okay.
I have a question that goes back to a previous discussion too. Most places in town, Ed, we just talked about the fire department on MLK. We thought it was a 4-inch, we thought it was a 6-inch, it turned out to be a 4. But most places in town we would know, wouldn't we?
Actually, there's quite a bit of our water system that was installed nearly 100 years ago, and we don't know what size lines are in there. We found out over time by digging down on them, doing repairs, and so we do have portions of our system are very old. They were put in, they were not mapped at that time, and so these things come up.
It's probably fair to say, though, we have a better idea of what's in there than we did 10 years ago.
Oh, yes, yes. And that's what this is being used for. We're constantly, when we dig down on a line, get a better idea of where it's located. We send our guy out, he gets a shot on it, and then we update our GIS. So our GIS is getting more and more refined every day.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries unanimously.
Bids were received for a mini excavator for the water department. The bids were as follows. Flint Equipment Company submitted a bid of $59,764.24. Bobcat submitted a bid of $55,767. Yancey Caterpillar submitted a bid of $58,198. We are requesting to go with the Caterpillar unit. They offered a guaranteed buyback for the equipment and a credit of $1,700 in parts for as long as we own the backhoe. We received recommendations from 3 different contractors, and they all said that this was a superior piece of equipment, that we could get higher productivity with it. We feel it's worth extra money. Based on this information, we recommend purchasing the mini excavator from Yancey Caterpillar for $58,198. E-Verify and Save documentation has been submitted. This is a budgeted item and will be paid for from the capital line item for machinery.
And pursuant to a discussion that we had earlier up here relative to this, there are no local sources to buy this equipment.
That's correct.
Okay.
But Mayor, I have a question too. Ed, did we give, just to make sure our bids are, all in line, did we give Bobcat a chance to say whether they would do the additional guarantee buyback or parts?
Well, they were certainly given the opportunity to offer that. One of the main things on this is the recommendation of the contractors, and they have indicated that we can get a much higher productivity rate with this piece of equipment. It's one that they primarily use, so we feel it will pay for itself in the higher productivity.
And as a point of clarification, in the original bid that was opened, that Caterpillar included that $1,700 in the buyback in their bid. Is that a correct statement?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
But that is my question.
I think, well, I was trying to.
Yes, thank you.
I was trying to throw you a softball, sorry.
I mean, we always want to make sure whether, regardless of the department, our bid's fair and not being presented.
Well, if you subtract the $1,700 in repair parts and the automatic buyback, I think that's where you're going in, like you said, the increased productivity. Sorry, we'll work that out next time before I ask that. Any other discussion? And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Can you be specific on that?
For the Caterpillar.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? You all right? Louis, I didn't see if you voted or not, I'm sorry. I apologize, I missed that. Thank you. Thank you. Next item, please, Ed.
The next item is the Aubrey Street Pool and Bruce Street sewer tie-ins. This project consists of providing labor and equipment only for a number of minor sewer system improvements. One of these items is the Aubrey Street Pool currently discharges their drain into the storm drain system. This is in violation of the storm drain ordinance. Part of the work we've done here is to design a tie-in between their drain line and our sanitary sewer near there. The rec department will be paying for that portion of the project, and the project was bid out with line items for the different items of work. The other work consists of improvements to the sanitary sewer on Bruce Street, and part of this work will eliminate a railroad crossing, which is currently a high maintenance item for us, and eliminates a lot of liability for the city. Bids were received from 3 contractors to construct these improvements. Hill City On-Site of Jasper, Georgia submitted a price of $8,500. C&L Contractors submitted a price of $16,680. TJ Lyle and Company submitted a bid of $33,370. The Water Department recommends award of the contract to Hill City On-Site Incorporated of Jasper, Georgia in the amount of $8,500. Portions of this contract associated with the Aubrey Street Pool will be paid for by the Recreation Department. This portion amounts to $3,200. The remainder will be paid for from the Water Department's budget item for maintenance and repair of sewers. E-Verify and Save documentation has been submitted.
Okay. Any discussion on this item? And if not, Chair will entertain a motion.
I have a question.
All right.
The Aubrey Street Pool discharged into the storm drain, the storm pool drain. I don't understand why they stormwater and the Aubrey Street Pool, since it's a drain, why they can't both go in there without an exception to it.
Well, part of it is the filter backwash at the pool, which is, basically polluted water is discharging to the storm drain. And that is not in compliance to go to a storm drain.
You good?
I'll accept it. I don't understand.
Well, think about what you did when you were a kid swimming in the pool.
No.
Okay. And then, and that would be going into the storm drain instead of going back to the sewer.
Not me.
Your brother or your friend or whatever.
I thought that made the pool turn blue.
If there's no other discussion, Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the bid from Hill City.
Second.
Got a motion, a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item, quickly, please.
Next item, bids were received for a skid steer loader for the distribution and collection department. The current unit we have is over 15 years old. This will be transferred to the wastewater plant for use on property and moving biosolids. Bids were received as follows. Reinhardt Equipment Company submitted a bid of $49,431. Flint Equipment Company submitted a bid of $55,792.87. Yancey Caterpillar submitted a bid of $58,500. We recommend purchase of the skid steer from Reinhardt Equipment Company in the amount of $49,431. We do have the E-Verify and Save documentation. This is an unbudgeted item, and it will be paid for from the capital account for machinery.
Any discussion on this item? And if not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to purchase from Reinhardt Equipment.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Ed. I fought the urge to ask you to define what a biosolid was. Mr. Porta.
Yes, Mayor. One other item on here is the master lease resolution with GMA. If you recall, when we started the recycling program, we had to spend about $115,000 on recycling carts. We have, sometimes you'll hear lease pool items being purchased for vehicles. That is a GMA product. We basically have a agreement with them, but they do not allow recycling carts under that program, so we had to go to a different mechanism to borrow these funds. Went to a couple different banks and asked for their lowest and best rate. We got BB&T to offer us 1.59% for 3 years on this recycling carts, and it's going through this resolution to allow us basically have a lease purchase agreement. Recommend approval.
Okay. Any discussion? And if not, chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Call up Gabe Egan for the next item, Water and Sewer Revenue Bond Series.
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to see all of you here this morning. It's good to see so much of our community's youth here with us this morning for Civic Youth Day. I'm here today to ask for your approval of a parity bond resolution which will authorize the issuance of the $6,620,000 City of Cartersville Water and Sewerage Revenue Bond Series 2012. But before I get into that, I thought I'd spend just a couple minutes, for the benefit of the audience, just to let you know what a bond is and how cities borrow. A bond is similar to how, like, an individual, if they needed to go out and purchase a home, they might go get a mortgage to buy the home now and pay that back over 30 years. A city cannot mortgage property, and the way a city borrows money would be through the issuance of a bond. And there are basically two types of bonds a city can issue: a general obligation bond and a revenue bond. And I'll just give you an example of what a general obligation bond would be here. Let's say the city was going to build a new park, and they wanted to fund that park and pay it back over 30 years. To do a general obligation bond, voters would have to vote on that bond and decide if they wanted to incur the payback. It's a tax obligation, so they would have to say, yes, we want to incur this debt to build this project now and incur the taxes in the future, or no, we don't want that and we don't want the future taxes. So that's a general obligation bond. The other type of bond, and what we're considering here today, is a revenue bond. And a revenue bond is not a tax obligation. There's a dedicated source of repayment for this debt here. And it's the revenues from the water and sewer department here. So all the bills we get for water and sewer each month, those go into a fund, and the profits on that go to pay back this and other bonded indebtedness of the water sewer system here. Cities have a benefit to borrow money. That's one reason our rate's so low, is they get to issue bonds where the interest is exempt from tax. So compared to like a corporate bond, you have to pay income tax on the interest that you get. So the rate's going to be higher, but for a government like the city here, they'll get a lower interest rate because the interest is exempt from income tax. And also another thing that really impacts the cost of borrowing here is the credit worthiness. And the city, is has good solid debt service coverage and a very highly rated city as far as the credit, so we're really lucky for that here, and it allows us to borrow at a cheaper rate. You know, just like with an individual, if you have a lower credit score, it's going to cost you more to borrow money than if you have a high credit score. So hope that's helpful, but I'll get into the specifics on this specific bond issue here. This bond issue is issued, of course, to fund the water sewer projects of approximately $6.5 million in projects to be paid back over a term. The final payment will be January 1 of 2022. The interest rate on this bond is going to be 2.19%. Worked a lot with Tom Reinhardt specifically on the structure of this bond issue. I know this was the first time where he really took the lead. I know worked with Dan a lot in the past, and of course the water department as well, but he's had a lot of good questions and really good to work with here and done a great job. But we decided to structure this bond issue. You have two bond issues currently outstanding that are paid off in 2018. So when looking at the structure of this, we came up with a amortization schedule that started paying this back in July of 2018. So once that debt is paid back, you'll start paying the principal back on this, and it really allowed us to issue these new bonds with a relatively minimal impact on your maximum aggregate debt service. So our increase in maximum annual debt service is less than $150,000 a year. And I believe in your agenda packet, you received a schedule with all the city's water, sewer, debt, the three bond issues, and also the two GFA notes that you have outstanding. One just interesting last point here I'll make, and of course open it up to questions, but these bonds are issued based on a parity bond ordinance that was first authorized in 1984, and just to give you an idea of how rates have changed since then, this was at 219, which I believe is the lowest rate the water sewer department's ever borrowed at. But the longest, the January 1, 2008 term bond here had a rate of 10.875%. So that's just how much interest rates have fallen since the 1980s, 1984. I think you guys are well aware of. Had some, I think Tom brought this up to you at the last meeting, but I'm just here for questions, and please ask if you have any.
Okay. Any questions, comments, or discussion?
Mayor, I have a question. Do we always have a prepayable condition on our bonds, or is that particular to this one?
Sure. No, I'm gonna go into a little bit more detail there, because we worked a lot on this one. This was very close in the way we decided to proceed with this issuance. There's two types of ways we could issue this bond: through a public sale, where we'd have to go prepare a prospectus and get at least one bond rating, and if we do that, we can sell it to individuals in as small as $5,000 pieces. Any of us or myself could buy those just an investment. Or you can go with a private placement, which is what we chose to do here, and BB&T is actually going to be the purchaser of this bond as well. But the costs up front are significantly lower to go with the private placement option compared to the public offering option, about $50,000 to $60,000, and then some ongoing compliance with the publicly offered issue as well. We probably could have gotten most aggressively a slightly lower rate through the public sale, probably around 2 or so, but doing the math, we decided that it was a coin toss, so we're going to go this route. But to answer your question, the call features here are at any time on any interest payment date, you can pay it off at a 1% premium. But then beginning July 1 of 2018, you can pay it off at par on any interest payment date. So any July 1st date or any January 1st date, you can pay it off without penalty. And compared to a public sale, the common way we structure a bond is for 10 years, it would be non-callable, and then after that, you would have the ability to pay it off at par. and, it's just common in the bond world. So the prepayment flexibility is better also with this option, so that's the way we decided to go here.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I got, so, we structured this in such a way that with some of the old debt being paid off and this coming in, that this should not add any pressure to rate increase.
No, like I said, we're adding less than $150,000 in maximum annual debt service. Two things had to be prepared with this bond issuance. The engineer consultant had to prepare a report, recommended the projects, and also estimates on the rate coverage. And you guys have fantastic debt service coverage with this new bonds, and you have the capacity to issue debt for any future needs as well. So
I read somewhere, is this considered a municipal bond?
Yes, sir.
That in aggregate, there are far fewer of those issued this year than in past.
Yes, and for new money purposes, yes, I feel like I've gotten the sense that, but we've been really busy this year, so that's good.
Does that help to drive the rate down? I'm wondering because of the scarcity of it and those being sought after.
It does. I mean, a big portion of the reason rates are low is just, the troubles in Europe and the, low federal funds rate. But supply and demand does make a big impact on where bond rates are. Okay. And we've seen a lot of, because of the low issuance and low rates, we've seen a lot of volume begin to build with, especially like refinancing bond issues, not for new debt, but just a lower interest rate. So I feel that this year will be, when we're through December this year, that the issuance is going to be higher this year compared to last year, once we're finished.
Okay, thank you. And just for council's information, number 19 attached to this, which I've got is page 130 of 143 in mine, is the list of projects that this issue will fund, if you're curious.
Yeah, page 130.
And Mayor, when y'all consider this motion, you need to have a motion to approve the bond parity resolution, which Gabe has done an excellent job of explaining to you, and also the bond placement agent, so you can hire Gabe to do all this nice work for you. He's already done.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay.
Mayor, I have one more question. In your opinion, what is the biggest mistake? This is just a general question. What's the biggest mistake in considering refinancing or financing a bond? Would it be front-loading, back-loading? Would it be prepayment pages? What would be the mistake that some city councils might make?
The biggest mistake in terms of, the debt issue for refinancing specifically?
I'm not sure that I even know how to ask that question.
Sure.
But as we talk about prepayment, obviously interest rates are important. But as we talk about, and you talked to us about some of our debt service ending when this began, with only around $150,000 difference. But what do some councils not consider?
I think a couple of mistakes I would see. Two. The first one is if a lot of folks, hey, we don't want to pay very much interest. We want to get this paid off as quickly as possible, and they'll try to pay it back too quickly, and then they'll run into a situation where hey, water sewer usage is lower, tax reevaluations, are lower, and you're in a situation where, hey, I wish I stretched that out further. So, I see that as a mistake that's been made before. And then,
so the length of time.
Yes. And, I think another thing is really important for city, more on the general obligation side, maintain strong reserves, general fund balance. If you keep that at least 3 months, that's one key aspect that the rating agencies look at when evaluating your credit. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? That's not what you said. And if there are none, Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Well, we need to make sure that the motion is in motion to approve what, Mr. Thomas-Meyer?
The issues for the bond that we have been discussing.
It includes the bond resolution and the bond placement agency
That would
agreement.
be very good for me.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you. And does your
My
second hold?
second also includes both of those
Thank you very
items.
much. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you,
Okay,
Gabe.
thank you.
Mr. Reinhardt. Morning, Tom.
Honorable Mayor and Council, first item I have to bring before you is getting some equipment and automobiles declared surplus. Attached to your agenda, you've got another list from myself that needs to be declared as surplus. These items include radios, cameras, that type of thing, and also vehicles. Once these are declared as being surplus, they will be advertised on our GovDeals website and sold to the highest bidder. I recommend that you approve the items to be declared as surplus.
Okay. Any discussion? And if not, Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Continue on. Next item.
And lastly is our monthly financial statement or financial report. This morning we were looking at the financial report for February 2012 and comparing it to 2011. In the general fund, revenues decreased over last year by $126,000, while expenses have increased by $177,000. This increase in expenses is due to the JDA debt payment expense and also increased capital expenses. Three areas of revenue that I look at on a monthly basis are local option sales tax. We have a decrease from last year, compared to last year, of $208,000. Police fines and forfeitures, we have an increase of $42,000. And building permits and inspections, we have an increase there of $24,000. That is the increase there is due to the two buildings that we are building for the city. The water and sewer fund, revenues have increased over last year by $51,000, while expenses have decreased by $102,000. This decrease is due to decreased debt service expense and also decreased capital expenses. In the gas fund, revenues have decreased from last year by $1.95 million. This is due to a much milder winter. Expenses have also decreased by $1.0 million. And this also is decreased due to decreased cost of purchased gas, again due to the mild winter. The electric fund, revenues have increased by $2.71 million. Expenses have increased also by $2.6 million. And this is due to increase in operating expenses and increased cost of purchased electricity. Stormwater revenues have increased from last year by $32,000. Expenses have decreased by $217,000. This decrease is mainly due to decreased operating and capital expenses. In the solid waste fund, revenues have decreased from last year by $45,000. Expenses have increased by $95,000. This increase is due to the timing of capital item being purchased. We purchased a recycling truck and we're waiting to get reimbursement for that from our GMA lease pool. And finally, fiber optics fund decreased last year. The revenues have decreased from last year by $187,000. And the expenses has decreased by $40,000. This decrease is due to decreased operating expenses, decreased MEAG debt payment services, and decreased capital expenses. And that is my report for this evening.
Okay. Any questions for Tom regarding the finance report?
Just one quick question.
Yes,
I see the year-to-date for the gas department is running at a deficit, and we've had a mild winter. Is that going to even back out? Because, I mean, we're pretty much near the end of...
Typically, this time of year, we will basically start selling the reserve gas that we have in our tanks, and that just hadn't been reflected. It should be starting to be reflected in the month of March.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tom. All right, that puts us through the first half of the agenda today. I'm joking. Any other business needs to come before council?
Mayor, I'd like to mention that this Saturday is Keep Bartow Beautiful, and Mr. Osborne has been heading up people meeting at ATCO, 10 o'clock, to clean and recycle 10 to 11:30, and anyone who wants to join us, you're welcome. Hour and a half in our ATCO village. Thank you.
Mayor, you probably want to have the department head stand up so they're and identify them so their civic youth will know who to go with.
Okay. Department head, stand up and identify yourself. Greg is with, thank you.
Okay.
Just at the water. Tom Culpepper, Police Department. Scott Porter, Fire Department. Bobby Elliott, Public Works. Don Hasselbrook, Electric. Gary Riggs, Gas. All right, our finance. Dan Porter, City Manager.
Randy Menino, Planning and Development. Richard Osborne will be touring.
I'm gonna have Tom do mine. This is Tom Quist.
And whoever the city attorney is, they also go with Mr. Quist.
Whoa. Whoa.
I've got to sit here with the mayor and
I
get
guess
a
now
bunch
the
of
question
paperwork
is, where does
signed.
the mayor and city council folks go?
They go with Mr. Quist.
No, usually we give those, Mr. Anderson doesn't have a big enough vehicle, does he?
I can take 2 additional.
Anybody else take some additional folks?
One additional, and
Okay.
the other to fit in.
Richard can too.
If you're a mayor or city council person, you come on up here after the meeting, ask whatever you want, and then we'll
Tom,
make sure you get
Richard.
with a good group. Because you can tell by
Greg.
this morning, we're pretty boring. Any other word, anything else needs to come before council? Motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.
Mayor, I need
You got a room fund like that.